Hey everybody, this is Wendy at the Broken Needle Quilt Shop in Bunn, North Carolina. Continuing with our block by block series, I'm going to introduce you to block number 2, which is the half square triangle block. There's a free downloadable pattern in the description below. You can make this quilt top with just one block. So let's get started. This is the pattern I'm going to be sharing with you guys today. It is a free downloadable pattern. The size I'm working on is a wall hanging size. It's 49 by 49 inches. There is also a free downloadable pattern that is larger. You can also make this larger by adding rows or blocks. So the first thing I want to do is I need to cut 7 inches by width of fabric from my light fabric, and I'll also be cutting the strips 7 inch by width of fabric for my dark fabric. Make sure to use a contrasting fabric of a light and a dark. We need to trim our selvages off of our strips, so I'm going to line it up here and cut. Now I have my strips set here. I have it lined up on my mat to make sure it's straight, and we're going to cut on 7, 14, and 21. That's going to give us 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 squares total because our fabric is folded over. So line up our number 7. 14. And 21. Now I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Now that we have our squares cut, we need to make half square triangles. So in order to do that, we want to put 2 pieces right sides together, our dark and our light fabric. Get them arranged here, and we need to mark this. Now you can do this with a regular ruler. We're going to put a line of the ruler on the diagonal, and we want to mark on a 1/4 inch from this diagonal line. So it'll be a 1/4 inch here. You can turn it around and do the same on the opposite side. But I have another tool that makes it extra easy. This is by Creative Grids. It's the half square 4-in-1 triangle ruler. Several things you can do with this. The first I want to show you is how to make our diagonal markings for us to sew. So I want to turn this to the blunt side here and put it up here at the corner, and then use this line and make sure it's at the other corner, so opposite corners here. And then I'm going to take a friction pin and mark on this side, and now I don't need to move my ruler because there's slots here for you to mark. So I'm putting my pin in here, marking, and now we're going to take this over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew on this line, turn, sew on this line, and then we'll cut it in half on the diagonal, and that will give us 2 half square triangles. Now I've got my blocks already marked, and it's going to go a lot quicker if I chain piece these together. And by chain piecing, I'm going to show you what that is right now. We're going to start with our first block, and I'm going to sew right on that line. Now I'm not going to stop. I'm going to take my next half square, or going to be half square triangle, and sew on this line. this is chain piecing. Now I'm going to turn it around and keep it pieced together, and now sew on this line. Now these are all chain pieced together, and I'm going to use this cutting gizmo. This is by the Gypsy Quilter to cut them apart. Now we need to just cut corner to corner. So you can use this tool and cut. Or you can also use your regular ruler, line it up corner to corner, cut, and now we'll take it to the pressing mat. You have 2 half square triangles. Now that we're at the pressing mat, we want to take our half square triangles and we're going to open them up and press them to the dark side. We want our triangles to come out like this, our half square triangles. See how nice and flat this is? This is pressed, not ironed, but pressed. Press is using the iron going up and down, pressing, not side to side. If you're gonna iron, this is how your block will end up. See how rippled? And it's all distorted. And I'll call this thread teeth. You can see the thread showing through. That's because I was ironing back and forth and pulling on it, which some people do, and then you get a distorted, messed up block. So I'm going to show you the proper way to press your half square triangles. So to make them nice and flat, you're going to have the dark side up, set the seam first, with the iron up and down, open it up with our fingers, and then press. Up, down. Nice and flat, and we'll put this to the side and do the same thing again with the next one. We're going to set the seam, open it up with our fingers slightly, just let it lay flat here, and then press. Do that with all of your half square triangles and they'll lay nice and flat. Now we need to square up our blocks, and in order to do that I'm going to use again the Creative Grids half square 4-in-1 triangle ruler. We're going to spin this around, and this is going to be a 6-inch finished block. So I need to use the 6-inch mark here on the ruler, and we're going to put it right here on the seam and cut. Now I need to turn the ruler around and do that once again. I'm going to put it on the 6-inch mark and cut. And now I have a 6.5-inch block. When sewn in with the other blocks, they will be 6 inches. To keep things simple, I like to sew 2 rows at a time. According to the pattern, we need to lay out our blocks in row 1 and row 2. You can check these off as you go. And then to begin sewing, and so as not to get confused, I like to take the first and second block and I'll flip it. We're going to sew these together. I'm going to mark it with a friction pin, row 1A. The second 2, right sides together, row 1B. The next set will be row 1C, and then row 1D. Now moving down, according to the chart again, we're in row 2, so 2A, 2B, etc. After I've got them all marked and lined up, I like to take a pin and pin it at the top here, so that when I get over to the sewing machine, if I've got several together, I'll know that this is where I want to start at the top here and sew down. As you're sewing your blocks together, you may come to a point where you may have a couple of blocks that when you flip them together to sew, the seams here are going in the same direction. Well, in order to make your points really pretty, you want them going in opposite directions. So you use a pair of scissors and very carefully you want to snip right near this, up to the stitches, but not into the stitches, just about maybe an inch, and then flip it over, and we're going to press so that we can nest these two seams together. And once I press it, I'm going to pin it. Wiggle it up here so I can feel it nesting in there, and I'm going to use the pin and go straight into the stitches, and right back out the stitches on the other side. And then I'm going to go take it back to the sewing machine and sew the 1/4 inch, and then I'll show you how the point turns out. See, now we have a perfect, beautiful point here. And this is where I snipped it in the back and pressed it to the opposite side and sewed it together. So now the rest of piecing the top, you will need to nest 2 rows at a time together, and in order to do that, we want to press all of the seams in opposite directions. So these blocks, I've pressed the seams to the left, and these blocks, I've pressed the seams to the right. So I'm going to flip these right sides together, and then I'm going to take pins and nest each seam individually. This is going in the opposite direction. This is going this way, this is going the opposite way. And put a pin right in the stitches, and it should come out right at the other stitches on the opposite side. That lets you know that you are perfectly nested together. Again, this one's going one direction, this is going the opposite direction. You can wiggle it with your fingers and feel that they are nested together, and pin it in place right in the stitches, and if I'm good, right out the other side in the stitches. And now I'm going to sew it over at the sewing machine. Ta-da! Half square triangle quilt top complete!